Welcome back to my Blender Weekly Progress Report, a series where I showcase everything I've learned in practice in the past week in the 3D rendering software Blender, in order to document my journey and to share any pieces of knowledge I gather along the way. The first 2 days of this week, I picked up where I left off in RyanKingArts' Blender beginner tutorial that has you following along as he builds a snowman. I went and added more details to the snowman, like the coal faces and the carrot nose, as well as the buttons to go into his body. It was cool to see the extruding tool being used to add depth to 2D meshes, and it goes even further with the Bezier curve being a thin string that, when given more bevel depth thickness, thickens the object. It took me some tweaking and messing around to understand how the transformation tools would affect the object. The next part began with creating the snowman's iconic scarf, which became a plane that, again with extruding parts, adds a shape to it. We added a cloth sim, my first time using it by the way, and I got to see how a sim affects the load times on my computer. This part of the tutorial became difficult to follow, so I found myself settling for the outcome of the scarf part, and went ahead into the creating materials part of the tutorial. The coal eyes with the nose and bump textures was the part that got me the most excited. Finished up Monday blending for 2 hours and 43 minutes. Tuesday was the UV textures part, and I thought people were exaggerating when it came to this part of learning Blender. At this point in my journey, I found myself getting the topics, and in my head, I get what UV texturing is doing. You're essentially turning the different areas of a 3D object into 2D planes that go along a designed or textured image. You then can move the connected 2D planes in whatever direction or rotation you want in order to get a seamless and clean design on the mesh. Remember when I settled for the scarf the day before? Yeah, that was some foreshadowing. When it came to the UV meshing the scarf, because of the way I thought I followed Ryan during this part, I didn't get the cuts correctly, which ended up making the material far too complex for me to feel comfortable with during this part. And as a result, I didn't feel invested enough in this project. I want to go backwards, so I kind of called it here. This day was also shorter because for some reason Monday night I couldn't sleep, so I worked Tuesday morning for about 7 hours with only 1 hour of sleep. I finished Tuesday with about an hour of 25 minutes in Blender, with a total of 4 hours. I decided to forego the tutorial because I finally went to bed for a long time with something cooking in my head. I was inspired by the cloth tutorial and thought it would have been cool to make a flag. I did my best with going off what I learned, but I knew what I wanted in my head was a water sim and a wind sim to complement the moving cloth. And what I learned in that part of the tutorial wasn't enough to get me to the finish line. So I caved and watched some quick tutorials that would complement this project. I also had my friend Nero on call, so that made doing this project a lot more enjoyable than it already was.
Yo.
My bad, bro. I did not hear the notification for the message.
Nah, it's all good. That's why I called you, because I was like, yo, he probably didn't hear the Discord message, because I didn't hear the Discord message.
I didn't even get the call.
See what I'm saying?
Maybe like more of an island kind of setup, I guess. And then I'm gonna add some water, and I'm just gonna have the flag blowing with the wind. But not just any flag. I gotta represent. I gotta show up and show out. So
Puerto Rican flag.
yes, sir.
Okay. So that flag piece right now is gonna have like the physics of like a cloth. I remember you said something about like fabric physics.
Yeah. So like, I mean, right now I have to figure out how to constrain it to where it's at. But if I was to play the sim right now, you see it'll fall, and then once it gets there, you see it starts crumpling up. You see? But I just gotta figure out how to fucking keep it in place. Cody Yoko. Nah.
Holy Yoko, motherfucker! I should throw you back into the womb. I don't know why, but lately I've just been thinking about how lit Ben 10 really was. He was standing in the middle of the universe as it was destroyed as Alien X, and recreated the universe just by clapping his hands.
That's crazy.
And it was recreated so perfectly that no one believed him until the actual species of that alien pulled him into a trial and was like, yo, you committed a cosmic crime. And it's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Everybody's like, yeah, what the fuck are you talking about? I was like, yo, you recreated the whole universe and acted like no one was gonna notice.
In my head, this project took about an hour, but getting the water sim took me like 8 tries before I got it somewhere believable. With some rotation, I was happy. I was also running out of time deciding work at night, so it felt good calling it here. It was today I also realized that outside of the technical skills I was developing, another skill I developed was my focusing skill. When I left to work, I began the cycles render to compare it with Eevee. If you see my shorts or reels on Instagram, then you know this took a whopping 22 hours, as compared to Eevee, which took 5 minutes, even with lowered samples. These tests were for baselines in comparison of quality, time, and utility. They helped me gauge the quality of the render themselves, the time it takes to render, and when does the render make a difference and when should I use it for which render. For anyone wondering, I'm using Blender 4.3.2 with an Intel Core i5 9400 CPU at 2.9 GHz with a 32GB RAM, and for my graphics card, it's a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1660 Super. My computer is a few years old, but I got tired of making excuses for why I shouldn't, couldn't, can't, or won't start learning. And let me say, with my PC so far, I am blown away by what it is still able to achieve. So if you're wondering if you should, stop asking yourself and just do it. Wednesday took 3 hours and 25 minutes, and so far this week, about 7.5 hours in Blender. I waited for the render to finish, which if you remember took only 22 hours, almost the whole day. But thankfully, I had to work at night and go to bed, so most of the time flew by that way. I made the executive decision that my computer was working hard, so I just let it rest, and myself too for the day, and also to reflect on why I kept dropping beginner tutorials before finishing them. I mean, this certainly wouldn't help me learning and growing if I gave up before completing something, and I know there are times that you won't be able to walk away from a project just because. I realized that what I was searching for was a more detailed beginner course that went through all the fundamentals. There isn't really a curriculum for how to learn Blender, you kind of go at your own pace. There isn't a definitive way of someone's teaching method and what they could teach, because ultimately they could be there forever trying to explain every little detail. But for me, I noticed most YouTube tutorials try to treat the different workspaces of Blender as chapters. You know, you have a section on modeling, you have a section on sculpting, you have a section on UV texturing and shading and animating, but they kind of skim through them and go through them pretty fast. And to be honest, that really isn't entirely their fault. I mean, I feel like there's plenty of reasons why, but ultimately I just felt like these tutorials I was falling short of completing because they themselves didn't feel complete. And so I went into Friday deciding that I'm going to do a new tutorial and I'm going to get it done that same day. So Friday, again, I wanted to try and finish a complete beginner series tutorial because my goal was that before I should bang a hammer, I should learn why hammer and what is hammer. So in Blender, I need to know what the hell all the tools were, and instead of trying to keep up and creating a dragon from Game of Thrones, I wanted to see Blender as a fun tool and to be like a kid in the sandbox playing with all his toys. The tutorial that would take me home was CG Cookie's Blender Basics, an introduction to Blender 3D, taught by Jonathan Lampel. This tutorial is also on YouTube, I believe, but I decided to sign up for free on their website for 4 reasons. 1. No ads on YouTube. Sick and tired of ads. 2. I feel like it's a good idea to mix up the workspace a little bit every now and then. So switching websites, switching platforms, keeping it fresh. 3. By joining a community, I felt like I could learn not just from the teachers, but also the other students around me. And this website seems to have that community in spades. And 4, and the most important thing I think anyone can kind of take away from learning Blender, if it's free, it's for me. At this point in my 3rd week, I felt very comfortable with Blender. So much of beginning Friday was powering through the first few videos, but still paying attention to any hidden gems in them. But there were definitely a ton of new things I learned as well. It wasn't until I got to insetting that I tried a new inset on a shape I was just messing around with. I stopped the lessons and spent the next 30 minutes making this, which my friend called the glaive from Crawl. Alright, back to powering through lessons, and I got distracted in a new little project, messing with arrays and mirrors. I made this and learned to keyframe with not just transformations of the shape's location, rotation, and scale, but also the color as well. I then decided to stop recording and close Blender, and powered through the last few tutorials and finished well into the night, excited to having completed something in full, also knowing that I could plan on coming back to these lessons later. The total time spent today was about 5 hours and 30 minutes, and my time spent in Blender this week was a little over 13 hours. So this week was eventful in a good way, and I feel much closer to getting better with Blender. As I keep going, I'm now asking myself, what is my goal with this? Certainly not for it to end, but do I want to be a modeler, animator, sculptor, compositor? Where does this Blender journey lead to? Food for thought that will hopefully answer itself in the future. What I do know is next week will be 1 month since the journey began, and my 1 month project will be, well, no spoilers, but for now, see you then.